Hi, my name is Blair, and I'm an alcoholic. Amen. Sober today by the grace of God. Before I say anything else, I'm going to say a prayer so I can make sure that I bring God into this and get me out of the way. I am the place where God shines through, for He and I are one, not two. He wants me where and how I am. I need not fret, nor fear, nor plan. If I will be relaxed and free, He will carry out His work through me. No pressure, man. I guess I'm going to have to find a bigger God. I have this progressive illness, which means that I always have to seek a bigger spiritual solution. Like I said, my name is Blair. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is May 1st of 2023. I have a sponsor who has a sponsor who has a sponsor. I sponsor other women, and I am actively open to sponsoring others. I've come to find that, if someone's put in my path, God's going to make time. What happened? I have a home group. It is the Simply Sobriety Women's Meeting. It is in Tampa. If you guys are ever in town. It's actually in Brandon, sorry. It's at New Hope Church. We meet on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. and everyone is always welcome. It's a great meeting. I have a service position. I'm an alternate GSR. So what happened, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So ever since I can remember, really early on, I'm gonna keep it kind of brief on the beginning part because we all know how to get drunk. But there are certain things that did stand out. When I was about 2 years old, first of all, I was adopted at birth. I was raised by an absolutely loving, caring family. I had two parents who adopted me, who loved me enough to take me in and give me everything that I could ever possibly need. At this time, I didn't always see that, but I am so grateful that I have two loving parents. My parents who gave me up for adoption as well, loved me enough to decide that, I was worth the better life. And for a long time, me being adopted was the blame for why I felt like I had these abandonment issues. I didn't fit in. I was uncomfortable. I wasn't meant to be in my family. I wasn't meant to be anywhere. If only I had known, what my genetic makeup was, maybe I'd be okay and I'd know who I am. But it had nothing to do with adoption. That's how my personal disease of alcoholism and the symptoms early on manifested. My symptoms manifest in a way that may not manifest in others, but this is just my experience. So growing up, I think I was about 3 years old, and my parents told me that I would walk in the room and just say, "Claire, don't feel well." I wasn't physically sick, but there was just something inside that just didn't feel right. A 3-year-old's not supposed to feel like that. My earliest memories was, I'd be, I'm trying to think here. Some of my earliest memories, early on, I had a lot of friends. I was in a lot of activities. The activities I was in are the ones that I deemed that I was the best at, because if I didn't feel like I was the best, which was probably a delusion, I wanted nothing to do with it because I always had to feel better then. I remember there was always a group of girls and I didn't think that they liked me, I didn't think that they accepted me. And come to find out later on, people don't really want to be friends with somebody who's extremely competitive, is completely against you, wants to point out how wrong you are so that I can look absolutely great. And that's my social experience from the beginning. I wanted to be friends. I wanted to decide who I was going to be friends with. If you didn't accept me, I was just going to drive my will harder until you became my friend. And I felt like this is what life was like. I didn't understand why everyone else was getting along and why I'm on the outside here. I remember it was probably 4th grade, all the girls who I thought were really cool started getting asked out by guys, right? And I wasn't getting asked out, so it was I'm pretty sure I asked out every guy in the grade until somebody said yes, because I thought that was going to make me feel like I fit in. But it didn't work. I had periods where I had best friends, and during these times, it was one of those things where you had to be friends with me, And if you weren't, like, I was gonna hold you hostage. And you definitely weren't allowed to have any other friends because, you know, you might find that you like somebody else better. So moving forward, that was basically kind of the progression of my childhood. I didn't feel like I fit in. I didn't feel like I was enough. I didn't know how to socially fit in. I was completely awkward. I was riddled with fear and anxiety. You know, I didn't feel like I fit in my skin. And that's how I remember my childhood. It's really funny because like the last time I told my story like this part, like my first drink was when I was 14, and like I called my sponsor after and I was like, Elizabeth, like what do I do? Like I said I was 14 and like I was really 15 and like I don't know how to retell my story. And like the reality is like I don't think anyone over the past few weeks has been thinking about like how old Blair was when she had a first drink, but like I'm pretty self-obsessed. So anyway, so I was about 15 years old, I was on a cruise. I started hanging out with older guys. There was this 18-year-old, and I thought he was the cutest thing ever. We were going to get married. So we were on the back of the boat, and he brings out alcohol. And it was me, a group of guys. I think there were some girls there. And within about a 10-minute period, I had taken 8 shots of a Bacardi Raz. And like I said, everyone's experience with alcohol is not necessarily the same. Because I did this early on doesn't necessarily deem me alcoholic or more alcoholic than somebody else. This is just how I share my experience and how my progression, you know, took off kind of from the start. I love the burn. I got that feeling. And everything was ready for me to apply. And I finally fit in. I was on top of the world. Like all those like chatters that made me different and separate shut off. And like I had found my solution. I had had this spiritual experience and I was alive. The next thing I remember is I remember like walking down the stairs of the cruise ship. I felt like I was floating. It was this euphoria, and I swore that I was going to do whatever it takes to continue doing that for the rest of my life because I had finally found relief to my problem. So I thought. And then after that, you know, I had sex with a 15-year-old, and it took until I like talked to my sponsor after that. Apparently, that's rape. Like I didn't even realize that, you know. And that's the thing. It's like. These are the positions that I put myself in early on. You know, it's that incomprehensible demoralization. Like, I was raised in a good home, in a good town. Like, I was raised with morals. Like, my parents told me to ask for help. Like, I would never tell you I didn't know. You know, my parents told me to be honest. Like, why would I ever be honest? Like, you're not gonna like me. No. And the best thing about cruises was that I hang out with everyone else's family because I didn't have to tell you who I was and I could be someone completely different. I had so much fun with that. But yeah, so I got really drunk, you know, slept with an 18-year-old, convinced I was going to marry this guy, woke up the next morning, completely sick, and could not wait to do it again. It was about a year probably until I drank again, you know, that same progression. Started to get more and more often, you know, as much as I could, as many opportunities as I had, I drank as much as I could. Started having consequences. I had a great GPA in high school. I was actively involved in clubs, you know, started getting in trouble for drinking, you know, started having these little consequences. And all of a sudden I was graduating high school and I really didn't care because I was part of life at last. You know, I had a group of guys I was friends with, they thought I was attractive. I had a best friend and we drank a lot. And for a period of time, like in my mind, like this stuff worked until the day that it didn't. And I was thinking about it, and you know, like, it was very early on that I remember going to my therapist. I was probably like 18 years old. And I would drink on the weekends, and I would go see her after, and I'd cry in her office, like, I hate the way this feels. Like, I'm out of control. I get so emotionally, like, you know, wrecked 3 days after I drank. Like, there was that 3-day period, and I was just bawling. And I was like, I'm never doing this again. And every week it was the same thing on repeat. And you know, I firmly believe that somewhere along that line was the first point that I reached, you know, that line where I was beyond human aid. Because she presents this solution to me and tells me, you know, why don't you check out this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous? You know, and I saw the word God and I was like, absolutely not. Like, there's absolutely no way I'm doing this. You know, thanks for the information, goodbye. You know, and that was the progression. I drank a lot, you know, I couldn't get numb enough. I had a lot of other things along the way. August 16th of 2012, I walked into my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and said that I was an alcoholic. The courts brought me in, I was aware that I had a problem. I wanted the courts off of my back. You know, later on the line, like I wanted to save the relationship. You know, as things progressed further and I got married, you know, and I had my first child, I had my son, like, you know, I really wanted to stay with my family. So like, if only I could just bring about this thing called recovery by like hanging around the right people, you know, hearing the right things, you know, maybe doing some of what's required, you know, magically like I'm gonna stay sober and I'm gonna be a recovered alcoholic. You know, the reality was like that was a really dangerous position for me. You know, I like Danny said, like I was on this spiritually high axiom that I was above all else, and I was untouchable until the day I wasn't. And the progression went down really fast after my daughter was born. You know, wound up, I was held up in a hotel room. This is Alcoholics Anonymous, so out of respect, I will not speak of other things, but I will tell you that anything that got me out of me and anything that got me numb went in my body without question to the most amount that I could possibly put in me. So I was in a hotel room, and somewhere along the line, you know, this was beginning of April of 2023. It's all really fuzzy. There's a lot I don't remember. I know that there's a lot of women who love me, and I didn't think anyone loved me because I thought I wasn't capable of loving me or connecting to God, which is where love comes from for me. And they did everything they could to get me out of there. I wound up going to a detox, somehow left there, wound up in psych where I went into a coma. I was unresponsive for 5 days. I had 6 tubes in my body. My body temperature had dropped to 95 degrees, and on all the medical reports, like it was written that there was imminent death. And mind you, like leading up to this, like I had built up this life in this like imagined delusion of recovery that I thought that I was living, and I didn't even see that I wasn't doing the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that I wasn't willing because like I didn't think I was gonna die of this. I thought you might, but like I'm really not that bad, and I'm really smart. Yeah, right, so smart. And it was one of the greatest things that could have ever happened to me. Because when it came to, I was willing to do whatever it took. During detox, during that period, I was midway through a taper, and that was when I finally said to the woman who is now my sponsor, who's one of the most incredible human beings I've ever met in my life, and I'm so blessed to have her. I said to her, I can't keep taking something that's killing me. I don't care what the withdrawals are going to be. And that was the beginning of the end for me. I told her I didn't care who knew that I was in psych. I needed calls coming in because I was going to die otherwise. And every hour I had a sober woman call me in that psych unit. And that is how Alcoholics Anonymous shows up when I want this thing. I remember having this gaping hole inside, and all I wanted was a hug. You know, my grand sponsor said one of the greatest things to me ever, and she told me to close my eyes and imagine the love that I have for my kids, and to sit with that. And then multiply that times infinity, and that's how much God loves me. That was the first time I ever had an experience where something filled that void that didn't come from anything other than this vital spiritual, solution I have. But that only lasts a short time, if I'm not willing to put in this work, right? So like I get out, I go into a halfway house where like I'm greeted with love. And I feel love from others for the first time. Like, it's really cool. I don't feel like I don't fit in. And from there, like I get into the steps. Let me touch on that. Do I have how long I have on time before I don't get to the solution, which would be absolutely horrible?
You're good.
Okay, cool. So I get into this sober living, and I'm convinced that I'm dying of this disease of alcoholism. And we had these rules where we're off property, we're allowed to call other people, like the only person, oh, by the way, at this point, like my husband's not willing to talk to me, I have no contact with my kids while I'm in psych, instead of showing up. I pushed my family to this point where he's getting, an injunction between me and the kids, which wound up not going through, but the point is like I was a danger to my family, I was a danger to society, I had drained the entire business account. And when I got out of psych, I can tell you right now that a police officer could have come up to me and told me that I had gotten behind the wheel of a car and killed somebody, and I would have absolutely no defense. Because I have no recollection of what I had been doing at that point. It took me days and days and days to come to the fact that I had even been in a coma. And this is the point when this delusion broke, is when I was in psych, I'm telling my sponsor, I really don't want to take a shower because it's really cold, and her response to me was like, Why don't you go take that cold shower and be grateful for it and be glad that you're not dead on the side of the road? And like that was the first time, like that's how my sponsor lashes me with the direct amount of love and the direct amount of truth. And I listened. It was the weirdest thing. And that was the moment that I realized that she was gonna sponsor me. So anyway, so I go to take the shower, I look in the mirror, and I hit the ground crying. I was 80 pounds soaking wet. I was bruised from the top of my head to the bottom of my toes from what the paramedics had to do to keep me alive. I had no conception. I thought that I was handling it. I thought I was okay. And that's how my disease personally manifests. And like I said, not everyone has to get to that point. That's just, that's not a requirement for being alcoholic. But this is where my disease took me. One of the biggest things for me was the fact that when I start using, I absolutely cannot stop and I have no control over the amount I take. And that was expressed very early on when I talked about that situation with my therapist, was I can't stop, even though I want to. When I go out, from night one, I had no control over the amount that I took. And that was how it looked. I didn't know if I was going to be psychotic that night. I didn't know if I was going to be like the park. I didn't know if I was going to become suicidal. I didn't know if I was going to throw up, pass out, get unconscious, have alcohol poisoning, or somehow be lucky enough to make it home in my own bed. And that's what alcoholism for me looks like. So anyway, so to the steps now. It's really cool. I have kids today, and I have a relationship, with my family, and I have my daughter's little hair clips, as bookmarks in my big book. So step one, definitely powerless over alcohol. Once I start, I can't stop, and I can't stop starting again because I can't handle the way I feel in my own skin. And the only way I know how to get that ease and comfort and that relief is to pick up again, even though for a long period of time, time and time again, it's been proven that it doesn't work. Life's unmanageable. Ooh, that one took me a long time. It took me a while to accept that, and admit that, my self-will had failed. Which meant that I needed another director. And that really started with going into sober living, because once I transitioned from psych, I had no idea when to get up. I didn't know how to take care of myself. I remember going in there, and all I wanted was a big book and excuse me to the gentleman, a feminine product. That's how this all started. And I needed someone else to tell me what to do because I had no idea. Step 2 came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Yeah, I came in and I knew that there was a God, but I didn't think mine was very big. But I was able to believe that my sponsor's God was really, really, really big. Because there had been an instance where she picked me up and tried to take me to detox, and I remember the vile side of Blair came out. And I'm sitting in psych, sorry, I'm kind of jumping. My grand sponsor goes, why don't you call Elizabeth? And I was like, why would I call her? She probably absolutely hates me. And she was like, no, she really loves you and she's really concerned. So I had already checked out the fact that this woman had seen me at my absolute worst, and still loved me unconditionally. 3, made a decision to share our will in our lives over the care of God as we understood him. So that means I am now out of the director's seat, to the best of my ability. I'm going to do what I'm told, and that is to continue with the rest of the steps. Step 4, I had been through the steps before, and I really thought that I put down, all these things, because I'd done a lot of inventory, right? Talking about coming into my first meeting, in 2012. And my 4th step was this thing. I was still raging with resentment. Step 5, I sit down with my sponsor. She didn't even want to hear the first 2 columns this time. She said get to 3 and 4. And I'm reading this, and for the first time, first of all, I was so sick of hearing myself talk. I was able to tell her everything that I had done and how I show up. And she didn't interrupt me, she didn't criticize me, she didn't judge me, and at the end of it, she loved me more. And now all my secrets are out, I'm free, and someone loves me. And that courage comes from God, that doesn't come from me, and that love comes from God. I go home and I take this quiet time, and I expect her to give me this holistic defects because she listened, right? Like, so she's supposed to do this work for me, and she's like, no, you're gonna sit quiet. She's like, you're gonna go to God, you're gonna make a list. And I remember it was like 37 defects long, and she's like, every single morning, you're gonna say the seventh step with all of these defects. And I was like, seriously? I'm like, this is really inconvenient, this is really long. And I definitely, I think back, but I did what I was told. I did what I was told, for the most part, to the best of my ability. Humbly asking to remove our shortcomings, that's that 7-step prayer. Here's the deal, like something I heard recently that was amazing is like, you know, I used to say things and it's like, you know, I'll have these defects removed, like God willing, right? And it's like, no, God's willing, but like, am I willing to get out of the way? And that's really what it boils down to, because I have no ability, and I've learned at this point that I am so beat down and so just done that like, I can't work on these things. Every time I drive my will, it's like that little kid who couldn't seem to maintain friendships. And I would always think that if I just try a little bit harder, it's gonna work out in my favor. And I just make a bigger mess, and that's how I show up. Step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them. Yeah, so pretty much anyone I've ever touched in my entire life made it on this list, and it's extremely overwhelming still to this day. With that being said, going on to step 9, if there is anybody here that at any point I have harmed or offended and I'm not aware of, please find me after the meeting. I would love to make amends to you because, like, first of all, I owe it to you, and second of all, I'm a selfish alcoholic and it makes me feel better. And like, the greatest thing about these amends is like, I start feeling a part of the world again. And it's funny because like I start getting these notions of like which amends I'm supposed to go to because it's that area of my life typically that I feel left out in. I haven't had a bad amends yet. It's pretty cool. I'm terrified every time before because I think I know what's gonna happen. And most people either A, they want nothing to do with me and I just let them know, you know, if anything changes, like I would love to sit down if the opportunity presents. Because that's what I've got to offer, right? I don't drive me a little harder. The second is like, people care about me. They want me to stay sober, they want me alive. And I have to honor those things when I ask them, what can I do to make this right? So that means that I continue showing up as a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I throw myself, you know, into the boat if I'm asked to speak. I show up. By the way, I don't remember if I said this, Sean, thank you so much for inviting me to speak here. I'm forever grateful. This is an amazing opportunity. And I do not remember if I said, welcome to the newcomers, because I am so sorry if I waited this long. I am so grateful you guys are here. If you're here, just stay. The beginning is rough, it really is, it sucks. But like, grab on tight to somebody and like, don't let go. And it's funny because I remember like, out of like sight, this was one of my first meetings. I came into the Sober Living May 5th. So that means that Friday, that was a Wednesday, so that Friday was May 5th. And I remember sitting right behind, sorry to put your name out, right behind where Mark is sitting. And I was terrified and I had a full-blown panic attack. And I pointed to somebody and they came to me and they sat next to me. And I was surrounded by people and I just cried and shook through it. And I made a promise that day that I didn't realize that it was going to be kept. Because I don't keep promises, especially early on. And I said, I'm going to keep myself in the middle of the boat because it was the only thing that felt semi-decent. Yeah, this is a special meeting to me. It really is. So those are the amends. Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. So throughout the day when things come up, I go to other people some of the time. When I don't, things don't work out very well, and when I get to the evening, I owe a lot more amends, and I really don't like making amends for the same thing over and over again. Step 11 is, you know, at night, when I retire, that personal inventory, I have a whole format, and I have this gift where I send it out to other women. Because I'm this open book, right? Because my experience can help others. And through this, I've learned that like this is how I get to know others. This is how I stay accountable. You know, there's been stuff that I send out that I don't want to send out, but like if I keep it to myself, there's no use. You know, and I can't get help for something that I'm not putting out on the table. In the morning when I wake up, like this morning, for example, my son had to be up for school at 5:30 a.m. I was up at about 4:30 because I needed that quiet. I was a little nervous about today. That was a little excessive, by the way. Usually it's like a little bit before, because at night, I say this prayer and I ask God, to please be willing to wake up before the kids. And somehow miraculously, like I wake up shortly before the kids get up. And I take this period and I sit quiet. I do guided meditation. Sometimes I do writing. I usually read a meditation to get me out of the way, because when I start the day in me, like, I don't even want to risk what that looks like. I hit my knees often. I scream to God and I scream to Him often. Step 12. And also, that gives me the ability to see, like, who I can be of service to that day. When I was in Chicago, one of those prayers that I was saying in the morning. Sorry, I was given the gift this past weekend to go up to see my parents and to spend the weekend with them in their home, which I was not allowed to be in for probably the past 7 years. I celebrated my Mother's Day with my mom for the first time in 7 years in person. I have 2 beautiful children and a husband who is very supportive because of the gifts and the change that Alcoholics Anonymous has brought about in God. Like, I take no credit for this. The only thing I did is I showed up and I did what I was told. That's it. Beyond that, like, I tried to bring this about my entire life and I was not capable of doing it on my own will. But I was in Chicago, and I'm saying these things and I'm saying these prayers like, God, please put whoever's supposed to be in my path and make me willing to make amends to them. So, like, I get to Chicago and I'm real scared to go anywhere. Because I think that God's going to put everyone in my path, every place I go, this is going to be horrible. So I'm talking to my sponsors, I'm driving the car, and, I remember what came about, we got off the phone, I literally screamed out, like, God, help me. And I looked down at my phone and I get a message from somebody local who I hadn't talked to in 10 years. It was not the time or the opportunity to make the amends, which was hard too because I just wanted to like run there. But it's like God's time, not mine. But the point is like within a second, like that's how God shows up in my life. Step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening is the result of these steps. We try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. I show up the best I can today. I can tell you that it's a lot better than it was a year ago. I act as if the best wife I can be, the best mom I can be to my kids, the best daughter I can be, the best member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I fall short every day, thank God, because if I didn't, I wouldn't need God. But working with others, there's no experience greater than that. To be able to sit down with another human being and see somebody not believe and go to believe it. To see somebody completely broken with absolutely no hope. And the lights to come on. To come back here and see how many people still can come. Right? Because like, when I'm beat down and willing in the beginning, like I can do the work really well, but it's like I said, like this is a progressive disease whether I drink or not. Which means that as time goes on, I need to continually seek a bigger spiritual solution. So like, if you're new, stick around, I promise you life gets better. Like, I'm with my family. I couldn't ask for more. I feel love in my heart most days. I don't feel alone most days. I'm part of with my kids most days. More often than not, And I have women around me that love me unconditionally, and the best part is that I know them and I love them. Because I'm not so concerned or as concerned about myself as I used to be. I promise it works. It does. And it's just that willingness, and it's like, I have to want to be willing. If you've been around for a while, definitely, if you're stuck or whatever, I don't know much, but I do know, I suggest, continuing to seek a deeper connection, because I know that my connection from yesterday doesn't work today. And my connection from 4 months ago definitely doesn't work today. I don't know where I'm at on time, but that's pretty much all I got. Perfect. All right. Thank you so much.